right. Hello, everybody. Very excited for the skill series. We're just going to give it about 30 more seconds for folks to start piling in. We already see a bunch joining right now. We're just going to, as I said, 30 seconds, and we'll go ahead and kick things off. All right. Good. Well, guys, everyone, welcome. We're excited for another impactful skill series. And we have Justin Manville with us here today, which we're super excited about. Couple quick things before we get rolling on the content. Number one, as with any skill series, our goal is to give you tactical and tangible advice that you can take away and do something with today. Always wanted to set that expectation. Logistically, a few things to cover off on. You guys should see over on the right hand of your screen a little pop-up, and within that pop-up you have a couple of commands that we want you guys to use as you so choose. If you have a question, you'll see the ability to add a question. What I'll do with those as the moderator here is make sure that I pepper those in and ask Justin as the timing permits. Alternatively, if you want to raise your hand, you also see the little hand raise function. That's an opportunity for you guys to actually directly engage in the conversation. We offer both formats. We understand not everyone wants to actually, verbally ask the question and do that. But so either one's good for us. And yeah, we have about 30 to 40 minutes of really structured content, and we allow some buffer for more of that conversation time. Really quick, objectives for this session. In this session, we want you to walk away with tangible strategies for funding your asset management initiatives. We want you to understand how to engage with internal and external stakeholders on your asset management initiatives, and make sure that you guys are equipped with the financial and operational benefits and ROIs of asset management. So that's sort of the backdrop here. I really quickly just wanted to introduce Justin. Justin, someone we've worked with in the past. He's been a really valuable asset to our team. Some of this content he's actually come in and shared with our team as an expert, and let's just say he knows his stuff. So a bit on Justin. He's the infrastructure asset management leader at CHA and has almost 30 years of experience in technology, analytics, and strategic asset management. So Justin, really glad to have you. Really looking forward to this. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dan, and I look forward to this as well. And I appreciate the introduction. I actually created my own introduction. And but one thing that I wanted to kind of point out is that, like Dan said, I've been doing this for about 28 years. I started in the computer science space. I have a computer science degree. And I remember in 1998 working with the city of Bridgeport on Azteca Pipeworks. And around 2008, I was one of those people that thought that asset management was a maintenance management system and a GIS. And around 2008, I got to sit in, I worked for a county down in Virginia, and I got to sit in on a capital planning committee, and that's when I really got interested in what I call asset management proper. Right now, I'm currently the secretary of the U.S. Technical Committee of the Institute of Asset Management, and I'm pretty active with Institute of Asset Management and the EPA.
Awesome.
So,
Justin, before we get in, I just want to, can we do our poll real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry. Awesome. Got no sweat. So guys, before Justin gets into the meat of his content, we wanted to pull you guys for two reasons. One, we want to understand who's in the audience and where you guys are at. But secondly, we want to understand just what you guys are most interested in deep diving into so that we can make this as relevant as possible for you guys. We got 4 questions for you. This will take probably 3 minutes to do. And yeah, and then we'll get into it. So launching question 1, you guys should see I am in operations, engineering, leadership, finance, other. And it looks like we already have some polls coming in. I'll do some live commentary on the results as they're coming back in. Yeah, it looks like we've got a pretty healthy split between operations and engineering. And then we got a few in other. So good. Let's go into the obviously very helpful to understand where we're coming from. Pretty light on leadership and finance. Question 2 is, here we go. I or my organization understand the process for getting asset management grant funding. It's always an interesting one. All right, that's fascinating. That's virtually an even split. It's 48-50. So 48% yes, 52% no. All right, question 3, launching now. This is a multi-select, so feel free to select from multiple of these. The reasons we aren't further in our asset management journey are blank. Feel free to select as many as apply to you, or none. Not surprising and pretty interesting. So it looks like the first 4 there, so organizational buy-in, perceived time to value, lack of perceived ROI, and lack of manpower are fairly evenly split. However, over 50% say that they are they're not further in their journey because of lack of budget. And the very last question we got for you guys is, in this session, I am most interested in, again, select all that apply. Good, again, pretty interesting as these things are coming in. It looks like a pretty even split between the first 2, about 36-32% of content for building my case internally. Absolutely, so 36% of you, definitely gonna be able to help you there. Understanding how to get funding, 32%, also gonna be able to help you there. And 86% improving my general asset management knowledge, and we most certainly will be able to help you there. So awesome, great. We always just wanna take pulse of where we're at here with the group. Really helpful, also a nice way to get you guys engaged early in the process. Justin, over to you.
Great. Yeah, that was super interesting, actually. Thanks for that, Dan. So I kind of want to lead into this topic, which is, strategic asset management now or corrective action plan later. I've been thinking about this topic a lot over the last year and a half, and I just kind of wanted to give you kind of some lead in here. So I've been doing asset management for a long time now, and my prior company, I worked with a lot of large utilities, so asset management was just kind of built in. At CHA, we started to, our Virginia office kind of showed me this VDH funding, Virginia Department of Health funding for asset management. They had $15,000, and at the same time, I was working with a small locality in Virginia on a corrective action plan, an I&I corrective action plan. And as I'm kind of doing these two things, I'm like, these things are identical. So why would anybody turn down, money to do an asset management plan when they eventually are going to end up in trouble? So I used to work with a colleague that used to say, you're going to pay me now or you're going to pay me later, and when you pay me later, you're going to pay me twice as much. And I started to think like, hey, that's the same thing with asset management. It's kind of like being proactive and establishing an asset management plan early is going to save you money in the long term. And so I went about like kind of convincing this client that, hey, let's do an asset management plan to meet your corrective action, your consent-driven corrective action plan. But the two are so similar. So the more I looked into it, the more I realized the similarities. So most of these slides will just be kind of explaining asset management, and then I want to bring up a corrective action plan and one of the state clean water state revolving funds asset management loan applications and compare the two. So let's start with what is asset management. Asset management is not an IT system or anything like that. It's defined, and there are several definitions of asset management. ISO 55000 is an international standard on asset management, and its definition is the coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from assets. The APWA, I'm going to skip the EPA since this is a mostly water group. The APWA has a similar definition where they're trying to maximize the value of your assets. And then the EPA, which most of this group probably aligns with, and so do I, they want basically asset management as a practice of managing infrastructure, capital assets to minimize the total cost of owning and operating these assets while delivering at a desired level of service. So in my opinion, and I think Dan, when we first met, level of service is where real asset management starts. Defining levels of service is where real asset management starts. And all of the things that kind of come before that are like foundational, but levels of service and doing that is where asset management starts. So everybody's got a framework. I love all of them. I'm a total asset management nerd. I am not aligned with any one standard or anything like that. I try to look at them all, but here are some of the definitions that I just spoke to, some of the frameworks I just spoke to. The Institute of Asset Management talks about 39 areas of asset management. The EPA has a great document called an effective utility management primer, and it talks about 10 attributes of effectively managed utilities, which in my opinion is kind of asset management. And then ISO 55000 and 55001 talks about some fundamentals of asset management. And this is probably the easiest to read, the context of the organization, leadership, planning, support, operations, performance, and improvement. And all of those frameworks say generally the same thing. And I always, in my Institute of Asset Management meetings, I always complain that 39 areas is too much for anybody to wrap their head around. So I kind of came up with this hybrid framework. So another framework to the mix. But when you start to look at asset management and what these clean water state revolving funds are asking for, and even what a corrective action plan is asking for, they're asking for leadership buy-in or some sort of leadership guidance. And below that leadership is where a written strategy or a documented strategy comes in. So we try to basically take, organizational initiatives and write those into an asset management strategic plan. So I kind of put those two pieces as what's coming down in this framework. And then asset information, I'm going to jump down to the bottom of this framework. Asset information, like it or not, drives all of this, right? Like we're talking about data-driven organizations, and we talk about maintenance management systems and GIS systems. Well, that asset information is critical, and that's the foundation. I call that the foundation, and that's going to drive everything in the middle. And in the middle, we have basically, people and process. I think you don't do asset management without people, and asset performance. And however you want to slice and dice that doesn't matter. to me, those are the two critical components of asset management. And then, of course, you want to have some sort of continuous improvement process where your organization is not stagnant, but you're kind of always trying to do better with asset management. So I personally stole this continuous improvement diagram actually from a bobsledder that said that their bobsled team, and the Olympics are coming, so maybe this is relevant. Their bobsled team sets a goal. They measure their actions against that goal. So how fast are they doing runs? They analyze where they can improve. I need to sharpen my bobsled or do whatever, get a faster guy to push. And then I set a path for improvement. And that right there is the critical piece of asset management. We always say at CHA, and I'm sure other consultants, good consultants say this, is that we want to meet our clients where they are. We're all on this journey and we're all at different levels. And this continuous improvement process allows us to meet people at their level. And so this is my simplified asset management framework that kind of combines the best pieces of the frameworks I mentioned earlier and aligns with these Clean Water State Revolving Fund programs. And I wanted to show you guys quickly, I'm gonna show you guys some of the documents that I was talking about. So I'll put a reading list up at the end of this, but there's some great reading out there if you want to know more about asset management and know where to start based on your poll. This is the Institute of Asset Management's anatomy document, and it's fantastic. It's 84 pages. It's a great read on everything asset management. It's international. It's British. They spell organization wrong in this document. This is the EPA's Effective Utility Management Primer for water and wastewater utilities. Again, love this document. And I'm going to post all these. I'll post these up to the chat, Dan, or maybe you could share them. This is the asset management landscape from the Global Forum on Maintenance and Asset Management, another international document. And I was on a team that recently rewrote this. So there's actually a newer version. And this document's great because it actually points you to a lot of other standards. So this is what I call the deep learning of asset management. And then there's ISO 55,000. You have to be licensed this document. So, you can read that when you get further along in your journey. But I'll send you these links in this presentation. But I wanted to go into like what is asset management for 10 minutes just to kind of set the stage before we talk about funds that are available for asset management. And what we're seeing is that that it's trendy and it's great that a lot of states, almost every state, is basically putting Clean Water State Revolving Fund money towards asset management. My region is kind of the East Coast, and Indiana has low interest loans. Virginia has money through the Virginia Department of Health. They have like a $15,000 starter. We've been talking to them about bumping that up because they're starting to realize that $15,000 doesn't do it. So they're going to start to come to the table with some more money. DEQ in Virginia also has some money. Florida is doing low interest loans. New Hampshire, I think, has one of the best programs I've seen actually. And we're going to talk about and hopefully if anybody's on the phone from New Hampshire or on the call from New Hampshire, maybe they can help. But they have a great program. They have a week's worth of training on how to get some of their loan money. But from what I understand, they're pumping up the level of loan forgiveness that they have. And then the last one, New York, has recently come out with $10 million in 2022 for asset management in their Clean Water State Revolving Fund. So tons of money coming down the pipe in terms of these programs. And the requirements are very similar. And we can go into some of these. We will go into some of these, but in general, they align very well with the asset management frameworks I've talked about. The EPA in general, I stole this from their site so you can see my little reference, but in general, they've given $145.5 billion in funding, 43,000 loans. They've done below market interest rates. And for every $1 from the federal government equals $3.10 locally. And the good news is, I think those in the past have been just projects. And now I'm starting to see like this planning component come in, like we talked about in the last slide. So the good news is that some of that money will be coming to the asset management space and the planning space. So we see this trend kind of only getting better. So you're probably already sold. Asset management is awesome. Free money. Nobody turns down free money. But what I've seen in this state revolving fund asset management plan programs are actually shockingly good. Like, so some benefits are federal, state, and local partnerships. And in my experience, the states have been amazing at working with localities in developing their programs, trying to come up with money where they need to, educating localities. It's been like really shockingly good how well these state revolving funds programs are kind of rolling out. I thought I got a call from the state of Virginia. We finished up a asset management plan for a client in Virginia. And I got a call from the state of Virginia, and I thought they were gonna like, oh, what's wrong? And all they wanted to do was help, and it was awesome. You know what I mean? And that was great. I sat through some training with the state of New Hampshire. That was super helpful, super educational. So the states are doing a great job with the local governments in a partnership. And again, I think with the level of funding right now, this funding is a asset management starter program, but more and more the states that are getting into it are seeing that they need to put more money towards it in order to kind of get people over the hump. That's encouraging. And we've seen a couple different flavors of how they're funding these. They're doing it through low interest loans or just loan forgiveness or grants. So they're funding asset management plans that way. If you're getting these like in Indiana, they have low interest loans. So on capital projects, so if you're doing a capital project of size, the low interest loan pays for the asset management plan, right away. So it's a great win-win. I often hear from larger utilities that, hey, our rates support our program. We can't be bothered with loans, and we can't be bothered necessarily with an asset management plan. Some people in the larger utilities see it as overhead, but having worked with a bunch of large utilities, I think the benefits are even greater there, even if you aren't taking advantage of loan money. Maybe you're looking at things more from a fine standpoint, like, hey, we've got to have this asset management plan to help protect us, to show regulators that we got our act together. So some benefits for large utilities that I've seen is, the fines are huge. I worked with a utility that basically was looking at an $800 million fine. Large organizations with lots of processes makes for quick, easy wins. Organizations that are large usually think they have their act together, but really don't. And so you can kind of adjust business processes quickly, and it saves money right away. Process and asset information are more critical since systems are large. So in small systems, you could have your resident expert that understands the system, tribal knowledge, as we say. In the large utilities, the asset information, the CMMS, the GIS play a bigger role because that's how decisions are going to be made. Decisions in large utilities are more than likely need to be data driven if they want to make the right decisions. So for the large utilities that say, hey, listen, I don't need loan money, that's fine. Maybe you don't. I still think you need an asset management plan so you don't get smacked by the regulators. And so that leads me to my kind of the proactive versus reactive.
Justin, could you go back just to and explain that chart there for a second?
Sure.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and you know, this chart here is some programs that were under a consent order from the EPA for sanitary sewer overflows. And full disclosure, this was with my last company. A lot of these were clients of my last company, but it's all public record. And so by putting them on an asset management program, we set a level of service of 2 overflows per 100 miles per year as a goal. And you can see that going kind of on this programmatic approach to asset management, we were able almost universally to lower those sanitary sewer overflows per 100 miles of line. And some, you know, had amazing results where we were able to get them under 2 per 100 miles within 5 years, and others were well on their way to getting there. So there's proven results behind kind of the data-driven, you know, planned approach to doing and optimizing maintenance. So yeah, thanks for slowing me down, Dan. So yeah, it's interesting. Large utilities, small utilities, in my opinion, they all need asset management plan. It's great. The topic of this is to take advantage of those loans, but if you're too big to take advantage of the loans, I still think you need a plan so that you don't get fined on the backside. So kind of here's the proactive versus reactive, and I want to jump back over to my documentations, but real quick. But in essence, you know, you can do an asset management plan early, or you can wait wait until you get under a consent order and get a corrective action plan. The difference is you get to set your goals in an asset management plan, and your goals are set for you when the EPA comes in and does a corrective action plan. I kind of want to go through, and again, I'm hoping if anybody from New Hampshire is on this call, they don't mind me showing off their document. And there's a 2021 out, and for whatever reason, I didn't pull it up. But I wanted to go through kind of a loan forgiveness guidance document. And then what I did was I scrubbed a corrective action plan from a client, and I took their name off. But I assure you that this document here is from a real I&I corrective action plan. It's not just my notes. But I wanted to go through and compare the two so you can see the similarities. And what I'll do is I'll start with the corrective action plan. So this utility had I&I, and so they were put under a consent order, and their consent order basically dictated a goal. Their major goal was to reduce the frequency and duration of sanitary sewer flows in their collection system. Okay, not an egregious goal, but somebody told them that had to be their goal. They had to describe the administration of a plan, including their staffing, the duties of each staff member, their current budget, and their training. You know, we would do that in an asset management plan. They had to describe the maintenance activities, basically their routine inspections, and for assets that kind of led to sanitary sewer overflows. They had to do some modeling on their baseline flows. They had to prioritize repair, replacement, and upgrade of system units. So after they did that condition assessment and whatnot, they had to go back through and prioritize. I love that. That's perfect asset management. We want to do that every time in asset management. They wanted a list of pieces of their system that needed to be repaired, replaced, or upgraded. Again, amazing asset management goal. And then they had to implement short-term and long-term rehab actions to address their deficiencies. They needed a map or an inventory of their assets, and then how they were going to fund the plan of action. Finally, they needed to do this on a yearly basis, and so they had to they had some levels of service and some key performance indicators kind of forced on them. So linear feet of gravity sewer cleaned, linear feet of gravity sewer inspected, repair, replaced, pump station equipment inspected, replaced. A lot of times, you know, this is like 1/5 of the system you have to clean or whatnot. So you've got to report key performance indicators on your activities. So again, all of this, if you know anything about asset management, you want all of this in your asset management plan. And it would be, if I'm a utility director, I want to determine, you know, my key performance indicators and not have those forced on me. So yeah, that's important. And one thing I want to highlight too that I think is important from an asset management standpoint is short-term actions would be capital, and then long-term, you know, that's part of like kind of a master planning effort. But anyway, keep that in your head. And now let's look at New Hampshire's program for asset management. I'm going to skip through all the details and get down to what the deliverables are in their asset management plan. So they want a vision statement, which is great. You know, why are you doing this? And probably you shouldn't write, so I'm not under a consent order. They want an asset inventory, and you know, it's awesome that they didn't like determine whether that's in the GIS or in the maintenance management system. They're just saying, hey, I need an inventory of my assets, just like the corrective action plan.
Hey, Justin, sorry,
Sure.
one quick thing. Someone
Sure.
someone requested that you make the text a little bit larger on this particular
Oh,
document.
yeah, sorry about that. My bad. How's that?
That's pretty good to me.
That's better. Okay. So they want an asset inventory. We talked about that. They want levels of service established. And in my opinion, it's so much better to establish levels of service on your own, because you can make them reasonable for your organization, as opposed to an EPA coming in and saying, hey, you're going to do 2 per 100 miles. You can say, hey, let's start with 6 and get better. So level of service goals, you know, stakeholder groups, all great stuff. Prioritization of assets. They want you to do a life cycle cost analysis. So you know, getting into the costing of the assets, a funding strategy, and then an implementation plan. So how am I going to get there? And then I really love the fact that they added a communication plan, because in one of your quiz questions, Dan, you asked, you know, how will this, or one of your survey questions, you know, how do I bubble this up to my organization? Yeah. And a communication plan is a great method for that. So asset management shouldn't be a document that sits on your shelf. It should be something that's actively communicated. Here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to lower our sanitary sewer overflows, and here's how we plan to do it. So I love this, and it basically talks exactly to any town, and what we were trying to do in the corrective action plan. So I summarize it here. A strategic asset management plan, you set goals, you map and inventory the system, condition of assets and criticality, you define some levels of service, and then you create projects, short-term priorities, long-term goals, and how you're going to fund those projects. The corrective action plan, as I showed you, is very similar. You know, you set goals, you're required to map and inventory your system, you want to do a baseline assessment, and I kind of put in blue CMOM, because CMOM is, I think, an old school way to say asset management. I don't know, they're very similar. Capacity of system, performance list of the system, so that's a level of service, staffing, prioritization, and repair of the asset. So this is the point of my presentation here, is basically you can get funding, you can get paid to do an asset management plan, or you can wait until you get fined and get put under a corrective action plan. So my question to everybody on the call before we transition into some questions is, I think you should ask yourself, how do you want to play ball? Do you want to be proactive, or do you want to wait until somebody comes and dictates how you run your utility?
Awesome. Justin, thank you. This is great. And we got a couple questions in, and guys, I encourage, if you have additional ones, just post them right here in the questions, or raise your hand and we can make sure to get you on the docket. I'll start off.
Well, one thing, I can't see the full chat, so I can only see the organization chat, and I can't see the full attendees. So I don't know if you can set that up on your side, or I'll just let you answer the question. Ask me.
Yeah, so what I'll do, I don't know how to do that on the fly, but what I will do is I'll make sure that if someone has either their hand up, I'll unmute them, and if they post a question, I'll make sure to bake that into my line of questioning, if that works.
Great, sounds good.
Awesome, good. Yeah, so Justin, I mean, I have a lot of questions from that, and I want to also incorporate some of the feedback from the group. One thing that I see continuously is getting hung up on terminology, and I think that might be a helpful thing. Can you explain just the differences, or maybe I mean, we can start with just terminology and differences between work order management, CMMS, and asset management. Specifically, if I have a CMMS, am I therefore doing asset management? Or the flip side of that would be, do I need a CMMS to do asset management? Or I should say, layer in also GIS on that for asset inventory. But that's kind of the question to start.
Yeah, great question, actually. And unfortunately, if any of you follow me on LinkedIn, it's one of my pet peeves when, and Dan, you don't fall in this group, but when a software vendor says like, hey, buy asset management for $35.60, or consultants go out and say, hey, we're doing asset management for this group, and we just set up their GIS. And I'm going to go back to my framework. I think GIS and CMMS are critical components in this day and age. I had a client one time that had a spreadsheet that had a bunch of tabs of their different pressure zones and was managing their water system in spreadsheets. Was he doing asset management? Yes. There's no reason to do that now. We have amazing software tools out there, maintenance management systems out there, and GIS systems. GIS is critical. That will allow your organization to be data-driven and really act as a foundation for asset management. But obviously, there's more to asset management than that. It's more of a people, like I always say, there's like kind of 3 levers that you can pull. You can pull the technology lever, and that lever is important. You can pull or move the people lever, and then you can move the policy lever. And the combination of those levers get you to the ideal state or the state that you're going to be, but there's definitely a combination of all those letters. So back to my framework, CMMS, GIS, a computerized maintenance management system, and a GIS are great foundations, and they can lead to asset management. One of the things that I'm seeing in the CMMS space is you can start to develop scenarios around kind of those business decisions. So again, you can run a scenario to say like, hey, these are the sanitary sewers, or these are the manholes that I need cleaned, or and I think you guys actually, that graphic that I showed with the reduction of overflows, I think you guys did, you guys have a workflow, if you will, that will optimize, and start to point maintenance to the right things to clean. So we're starting to see that trend in maintenance management, where it's starting to be smarter and starting to develop workflows that will help optimize where operators go. But that's not asset management. It's the big picture is asset management.
Yeah, love that answer. And Eliza Morrison, I'm going to get to you in 1 second, so keep your hand raised there. I'll just add on to that, Justin, from our perspective, and candidly, we have every interest in selling people software. if you don't understand the data you want to collect, if you don't have the workflows and business decisions and logic, it's awfully tough to make the software successful. So I say that betting against ourselves a little bit, and the caveat to that is you don't need to have that defined for every type of asset and every type of workflow. So I say that not to overwhelm people, but to say that it's better to have good definition around a smaller scope than to have no definition around a larger scope. And we want to see that with our customers because we want to see our customers be successful.
Absolutely, and I think you and I were talking earlier this week about how utilities fail in asset management.
Yeah.
And usually we see folks fail because they try to eat the elephant whole. Yep. They say, I want every asset that's worth more than $5,000 into my system, and I want to manage all of that. And I actually had a client out in Oregon that a great example for your group. They were a parks group, and they wanted to manage every asset worth $5,000. But the problem is their operators had to go into this park and do a work order, if you will, for every bathroom, every trash can, every picnic table. And in reality, what we ended up doing is saying, like, hey, can we just say that we've managed the park to a certain standard that day, or we've done that annual maintenance? So people who try to go and eat the elephant whole, that's a hard path to success.
Yeah, and to further that one, and sorry, Eliza, I really will unmute you in 2 seconds. Eating the elephant whole, yep, no question. That can be a recipe for disaster, and what we'd call like a really long timeline to value. One of the metrics that I'm not sure this might be a new KPI for the industry that we're piloting a bit but time to work event one. So like how quickly can you get a thoughtful, benefit? Don't go through this massive exercise that requires buy-in from 19 different departments. But how can you again have solid definition of your service levels and your workflows and data construct for like a thing or two things, and then grow from there.
Yep.
So, Eliza, sorry, keep going, Justin.
No, I know Eliza has a question, but yeah, Roger Sessions came up with a thing called simple iterative partitions, but I'll let you guys read that on your own.
So, Eliza, I will unmute you now. I know you raised your hand like a couple minutes ago, but you should be able to speak now.
Yeah, no, I'm just letting Justin know that New Hampshire is here. And you mentioned that earlier on, so just wanted to let you know we're here if anybody has any questions regarding that program.
Yeah, awesome. maybe Dan, what we do is, matter of fact, this might be a good time to share if you kind of go onto the EPA site, there's links to every state's program. And so, yeah, contact your state. So this is a great resource. And I know that on this call, there's folks from all over the country. And I would encourage you to get to know your Elizas of the world, and I'm a big fan. Anybody in New Hampshire, I'm a fan of what they've got going on in New Hampshire. I think it's one of the best. But here's a great program. If you can see my screen, I encourage you to get to this EPA site and seek out the folks that do that. So yeah, good to hear you online, Eliza. You guys have an awesome thing going on.
And Eliza, I'll just keep you, if anyone does have questions specifically for Eliza, I'll just keep you unmuted if that's all right. Just feel free. Another question from the group, this one came from Kathy. And it's actually related to a question I had. Let's talk about those objections. So if we go back to the data or the poll data where we ask the audience, why aren't you further along? Whatever further along means, right? It's all relative. We heard number one, that I don't have enough budget. I would always make the argument that you can't afford not to do asset management, but I understand short versus long term. Justin, what would you say is the number one, if you were giving advice to someone to get over that hump the I don't have budget, what is the single best piece of advice you could think of, or couple pieces, I should say?
Well, I agree that you can't afford not to do it. And unfortunately, what happens a lot of times is, so that I&I plan that I showed you, I think it was, they were on the hook for $40,000 for every overflow. And so that could put them out, right? But unfortunately, a lot of utilities are kind of like, hey, the EPA is never going to get to my 50,000 person utility. And they are willing to kind of like bet on that. You know what I mean? And so I hate to say it, but like, you're either there or you're not. Like this funding, like I said, is a great starter, like is a great starter program, but there are folks, and we've talked to folks that are just like, hey, the EPA is never going to come down to my 50,000. And they don't. What I've seen in the industry, like if you look at the Seattle area, they came down with a massive fine for Seattle Public Utilities. And the goal was to basically scare everybody else that they couldn't get to along the Puget Sound. And there was a utility director in Port Angeles, which is on the other side of the Puget Sound. And he's like, man, that fine really scared me, so I'm going to establish an asset management program. And the guy just below him was like, well, they'll never get to us, so like I'm not going to bother. So long story short is you can't afford not to.
Yeah.
There is funding available. We have a funding, again, not that I don't want to plug CHA, but most consulting firms will have a funding person. CHA has a funding person that can go out and help you find funding. But I like your answer better, that you can't afford not to do it, because when the EPA comes, you'll pay.
Yeah, good. I love that. There are a couple other questions I wrote down here. I'm trying to think of the right one to feather in here. What are, like, okay, so this is a good one. If an organization has tools for asset management in place, CMMS, GIS, what are, if they already have sort of made that decision and maybe haven't been effective in getting it off the ground yet, what do you think is the very next first step for that group?
Yeah, and I have some back pocket slides that I want to show you, that I'll show the group actually. So they have data, right? And we see this a lot. This is common. So if organization A is like, we really want to do asset management, step 2, and I said this earlier in our presentation, setting levels of service is where everybody almost falls down. 1, it's political. 2, it's you have to communicate with others. So the nice thing about like having, what happens in asset management a lot of times is you have your IT folks, they're over there, you know, optimizing the maintenance management system, writing reports, updating the GIS, and that's great. You have the engineering department, and I'll show you a graphic. You have the engineering department, and those folks are planning capital, and they get to be in their silo too, right? Operations are the guys down the street that nobody wants to talk to, so they get to do their own thing. And then the finance director is, you know, waiting for everybody to submit their budget. And so a lot of times asset management becomes these 4 silos. And like Dan, I'm sure as a vendor, you're probably like identifying like who's the person that's going to like champion this. And maybe it's a technology person, maybe it's the engineer, but good asset management is at the intersection of these 4 areas or these 4 departments. So if you have all the data, you have all the technology, you know, you're doing some engineering, you're obviously doing operations, and your finance director still exists, the levels of service are almost force an organization to bring those 4 people into the room. And I'm sorry that this is kind of a long answer, but I want to go through these 3 slides. And so levels of service are like, what do we want to be as an organization? What do we want to do? And then how do we measure our success? And so there's a couple things. I'm going to show you another graphic real quick. And for those of you on the call, you can tell that I was prepared for this question. But if you look at kind of where asset management sits and a strategic asset management plan sits. It actually sits below organizational plans, and that strategy part should be supporting organizational objectives and organizational strategy. I believe this is in ISO 55000, but it's also in the anatomy document that's out there, this graphic. And then those strategic plans support management plans. So your levels of service, you want those to support your organizational principles. And having that conversation around levels of service of like, where are we today with our assets and where do we want to be in 2035? Getting those 4 departments in the same room talking about that is what I said at the beginning of the presentation, where asset management starts, in my opinion. All that inventory, all that other stuff, that's great, that's foundational. This is when real asset management starts, when you start to have these conversations. So again, levels of service basically help you visualize and organize that strategy.
Yeah, so I could not agree with you more. One of the things that when we engage with prospects or customers, we do we do see that where the level of service, which I think of as just the outcome, is not well defined. So it's awfully, I'll just say to people on the phone, it's awfully hard to build the case when you say when the outcomes or benefits you're looking for are, we want to make things easier, we want to make things more organized. That's not really an outcome. So what I'd push people toward is, if you have a defined outcome in mind, whatever it may be, there's a lot of different, I'm sure we could do a whole deep dive on what levels of service are, or the outcomes that your business is looking for. It becomes much easier to say, okay, are we in alignment that we have these 3 goals as a company this year? And therefore, in order to do those things, we cannot, number one, we might not even be able to measure, but we certainly won't be able to improve if we don't get these things in order. And those things can be technology decisions, they can be staffing decisions, they can be any number of things. So I just couldn't agree more with that statement. We try and push for that. The second thing I would say, and this is, I wouldn't call it selfish, but it helps us prove value. It helps everyone really demonstrate how far we've come. And that's, otherwise it's like, yeah, we've made things easier, we've made data better. Like that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't translate to any sort of outcome. Whereas in Justin's early example, that's why I sort of said, let's double click on that, the SSO example. We've decreased SSOs by this amount. You can actually, we got to get better at showing whatever those outcomes are. Yep. So sorry to get on my soapbox there, but it's the most important concept, I think, that I would, in this presentation, I think that's the most important concept that I would relate to.
Agreed. And again, I always say, this is where asset management starts. And one other thing, and I'm sure you've seen this as a CMMS vendor, is, and we talked about this earlier, like data inputs need to inform outputs. So a lot of times we have these like massive inspection forms, like back to that park example, and we're collecting all sorts of data. Utilities collect reams and reams of data, petabytes of data that are meaningless. Data does not translate into knowledge in that case. And so when you have a level of service goal, you can start to say like, hey, here's the data we need to capture, minimize it in a way, because your goal is to save the operator's time, minimize it, and make sure that it informs outputs. So that data inputs inform outputs is a huge thing. And then, yeah, those measures that you talk about, that's where operators start to see like, oh, now I get it. Now I know why I have to input all this data into this maintenance management system, this damn maintenance management system that they gave me, because it results in low, reduced overflows. Like that's why you are in business, Mr. Operator or Mrs. Operator.
Yes, yeah, I love that. And yeah, I agree. We see it all the time too. It's like if you start without the outcome in mind, and therefore without understanding the data that needs to be collected to understand how to improve the outcome, we have seen, in the past, I just want to collect everything. And it's like, you might not need to collect everything. Don't make it an overwhelming exercise. Yeah. Distill it, simplify it. One other big picture question I had was, like what future opportunities, grants or otherwise, will utilities miss out on if they don't make progress on this now? Like what are the compounding effects of waiting?
Well, so I don't see this slowing down. And as a matter of fact, like the infrastructure bill coming out, like we won't get political, but I think the infrastructure bill is needed. I wish that we had national asset management like most of the world, so that we could actually do an apples and apples comparison and put the money in the right place at the right time. But, you know, we're Americans, we're doing it our way. And so I don't see this slowing down at all. As a matter of fact, I kind of see this funding, and I've been telling folks this, and that maybe the folks from New Hampshire or anybody else who's with a state agency can chime in on this, but I see funding coming down to the states, and then the states kind of delivering it to the localities. I see that only increasing. Like I said, New York is rolling out their program. They've committed $10 million in 2022 for asset management plans. And so I kind of see it kind of rolling down, which is a great thing. And I don't know if anybody from New Hampshire wants to add to that, but I don't see it ending, is the short story. Is I see it only getting bigger, and and asset management being more mandated or required, you know.
Definitely. And I noticed, Eliza, somehow you went back onto mute, but I wanted to open it back up if you had any commentary on that, because it looked like your hand was up.
Yeah, no, I have heard chatter, but nothing like set in stone regarding that specifically in New Hampshire, but I wouldn't be surprised at some point in the future as part of a clean water SRF, you know, like prioritization of points when it comes to picking the top tier projects, that if you have an asset management program that shows that this is a priority project, then maybe that gets higher points. Or another piece that's already going on today is the physical, the FSP requirements of clean water SRF. That's kind of a very watered down version of asset management for those specific assets within those projects. Right now, if we already have an asset management program for that community that already takes into account those assets, we say that the asset management program covers that. You don't have to do those FSP requirements. So it's already coming into play. It's just a matter of when it's, you know, the hammer down on when it's a requirement versus not. And I definitely could picture it going that way. Whether or not it does or not, who knows? But
on the transportation side, I know most of the folks here are water, but on the transportation side, they sort of have that. It came out, if they have the Federal Highway came out with like a requirement for the states to have a transportation asset management plan. I believe that came out of like MAP 21. So on the transportation side, they're starting to kind of get there, and I can kind of see the water side getting there too, you know. But it also, not to get too into the weeds, but it also has a lot to do with funding, right? Transportation funding is general fund, where some utilities are, you know, back to my whole large utility thing. They're like, well, our asset management's in rates. We don't need federal money because, but I don't see it slowing down. I don't see it slowing down at all.
Yeah. Good. Well, believe it or not, we're already at the top of the hour. So I want to wrap up with a few things. First and foremost, I just want to say thanks to Justin. I know he has a minute of reading, et cetera, that he wants to share, but I will say we'll make sure that the folks who attended, as well as those who just signed up and didn't, we will be following up with some materials, including a recording of this. And again, Justin, just really want to say thank you and give you a minute to give your closing remarks, and really thank you to everyone on the phone. It's been another good one, and we will again make sure that we follow up with stuff that's going to be helpful to you coming out of this.
Yeah, so Dan, maybe the follow-up, you know, I can't click on these links and send them up in the chat, but as a follow-up, maybe what we can do is give everybody kind of these links, or
you bet.
You know, there's some really pretty good asset management. Oh, we'll share the slide deck maybe. So
yeah,
good asset management. I just want to say that I kind of start off with the simplest. Like, so if you're new to asset management, this EPA simple program is a great link. And then I kind of get into the effective utility primer. IAM's anatomy document, this global form for maintenance and asset management, and then the holy grail, you know, the top dog is ISO 55000. I kind of think that's a little bit like too out there, frankly, but it's good. So this is a good reading list. And then, you know, I know we only have a minute, but like strategic takeaways, you know, I urge you to be proactive. Asset management's a framework. It's not a software tool. It's people, process, and technology. You know, asset management helps balance value with effort, and we try to balance risk with levels of service. If you take anything away, Dan and I are in agreement that levels of service, in my opinion, is where asset management starts. Without those, you're not really doing asset management. And asset management, I believe in my heart of hearts that it's the most cost-effective way to manage a utility. And so you folks, by spending this hour, have hopefully made at least a little investment in kind of getting there. So thank you, Dan, and thanks everybody who listened in. And here's my
Thanks,
contact.
everybody. Yeah, we'll be sending out the follow-up materials. Everyone have a great rest of your Thursday. Stay tuned. Keep going. All right, guys. Take care.
Take care.